Thanks so much for being here. A little bit about myself. I'm a physician assistant, and I worked for many years doing oncology, which helped me prepare. The other thing is that when I was 16, my mother was very ill with rheumatic heart disease and underwent surgery. And they took me in the room. She had surgery, and they took me in the room to see her. She was in ICU, and I wasn't prepared for anything. She was machines everywhere, in a coma, bags everywhere, obviously not talking, and they took me out, and then the call came the next morning that she died. And in 1969, no one discussed death. My mother, in her wealth of knowledge, and she's an amazing woman, she gave us wheat germ when we were like in the 1950s. She said to me a few weeks before she went in for surgery, when I die, and I said, I want to hear this. She goes, when I die, listen, don't let me go to Bernheim. At that point, there were 2 Jewish funeral homes in the area. We had choices. I don't like his mustache. I only want to go to Apter. So when my father came home from the hospital, I said, you have to go to Apter. Mommy said she can't go to Bernheim. He said, why? So she had tried to prepare us, but nobody was ready. We weren't ready for her to die. I mean, she left little notes all over the house for things like remembering, but nobody was prepared. And then in those days, you died, and then a week later, you go back to school, your life is over, and no one discusses it. And I'd like to think we've gotten better, but in some ways, we haven't gotten better. We still are so afraid of death. We still don't prepare. I mean, think about it. Who here is ready, has talked about death with their family? Who has had a really in-depth conversation that if, God forbid, you die tomorrow, every single thing is in order, and all they have to do is do the checklist, and then they can grieve. And I'm going to bet you most people don't. I realize I don't have everything done because my kids won't talk. They refuse to discuss it. My husband still says I'm getting cremated, and I said I'm not. So I guess whoever dies first gets what they want because we'll have to honor the wishes. So this is a very broad talk, and I'm going to throw a lot of things at you and ask me questions back. I'm going to miss things, and I'd like to get your pointers on some things, and let's go with this. The best we can do is get your affairs in order. Before I start, I do have a daughter-in-law who's a mental health attorney, and the one thing she said to me was, when did you last do your will? And I said, well, your husband and my other son go to Bobby and Liddy. She said, not good, because they're 35 and 37. And she said, and get rid of your safety deposit box, which is the most important thing, because if you put anything in there, it doesn't matter what it is, it gets locked up. And during COVID, you couldn't even get into your safety deposit box. So we closed it up, and we have a safe in our house, and everything is in there. All the kids know how to get in the safe. So that's something that if you haven't done yet, please do that. Put that on your to-do list tomorrow. Get rid of your safety deposit box and just get a safe. Or something in your house, but don't leave it at the bank. Okay, so the objectives. Understanding what it means for advanced directives with MOLST forms, POLST forms, the conversation, and we have to discuss death, and we don't. You know, you talk about it, and I'll say to my kids, let's talk, and we'll say, another day. We don't want to do it. We're having a good time. But we need to be able to talk as freely about death as we do childbirth. You know, when you get pregnant, you sit there and you talk about, oh, what's the baby's gonna, what are we gonna name the baby? Who's a pediatrician? What room are we gonna put the baby in? What kind of crib do you want? You go online, you find all the important things about babies. Have you done any of that about death? Do you know all the forms you need? Do you know what hospital you want to be in? Do you have your DNR forms? Do you understand what happens if you call 911 if you suddenly die? Do you want chest compressions? Do you want a feeding tube? There are many things, and we haven't really talked about it, and we need to all discuss it as freely and easily as we discuss childbirth. Because somebody once famous, I don't know who it was, said, there are 3 things definite in life: birth, death, and taxes. Not sure about the last one at this point in life, but and here, this is a great statement from this woman out in nonprofit end-of-life doula. We live in a death-denying culture, and it's so true. When I worked in oncology, I worked with a wonderful doctor, and we would talk about cancer and what was going to happen, and the minute, literally, we found out they were in stage 4, they were metastatic, we said, this is what's going to happen. Might not be tomorrow, might not be for months, but you will eventually be at this point, and you will need hospice, and this is the steps. So they understood, so there were no surprises what was gonna happen. Your stage 4 terminal cancer, you're gonna die. Let's get things ready so the last part of your life is enjoyable. It's not wrapped up in, I didn't do this, and I didn't do that, I didn't say goodbye to people, and I didn't do this, and there are lots of ways we can make that better for all of us. So, basics. Get your advance directives taken care of. And that's really important. You do not need a lawyer to do that. We think we do, but you really don't need a lawyer. You can get a form online, but you need to get those done. And in the advance directives, you pick people, you pick a person. And one thing I'm gonna advise, never put two people on the same line. Like never say, who makes a decision if I can't do it myself? Never say, my sons, my daughters, someone's gonna fight. You have to pick one person and explain to all the kids, or whoever it is, why you're picking that person, and then another one, and then another one. Because I've seen literally over a deathbed in ICU, I've seen fights. Even though because they're both in the same line, and mom, you can't die now because so-and-so's gonna have a baby. Well, but you're ready, she's ready to die, and you don't want that to happen. When you die, you want to be at peace, you want to know your kids are at peace, and that everybody is as copacetic as they can be. Also, your adult children have to have it. The minute they're 18 years old, they have to have their own advance directives. Because when you go to college, or 18, you can't have a say. You can have a kid who's hit by a car. It happened in Baltimore. They were hit by a car, and they were in a coma. And they were 19 years old, and mom couldn't say anything, couldn't do a thing. It goes to the ethics of the hospital because they were over 18 and nothing was done. I think there's some program, but mommy something, I don't know if anybody can help me. Mama Bear, that should be used. Because I've been talking to people, parents, working at College Health, and I couldn't tell them anything because they hadn't filled out the forms. And it's not because they don't want you to know, it's just, you forget. You don't think about it. Now, the other thing we'll talk about briefly, because we'll go into more, but a MOLST form and a POLST form. And I'm sure most of you know what they are, but they're different names for different states. In Maryland, it's Maryland Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment. The POLST is, I think it's Physician Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment, but every state has their own forms. And in most states, they have to be signed by a physician, a PA, or an NP. But the forms are very specific, and they talk about, do you want CPR, don't you want CPR, do you want to be intubated, do you want feeding tubes, if you want a feeding tube, and it gives time limits on how long you want it. And most forms don't do that. So when I do my forms with my clients, I incorporate them all, because I think you take a little bit of this and a little bit of that and put them together. But if you want a feeding tube, how long do you want to be in a feeding tube? And that's harder to pull out than stopping a ventilator. And people don't understand a ventilator, that we're fake breathing. And when we're going to compress you, we're going to break all your ribs, particularly if you have metastatic disease in your bones. We're going to compress and break your ribs. So people need to be understandable. They need to understand what this means. Will or trust. You need a will. You have to have a will. You still might have to go through probate, but that can be done through your lawyer, and they're pretty easy to do. Passwords. A lot of times when you go online, supposing, like I go into my husband's Medicare account, and I'll look for it, and then they'll say, we're sending a code to his phone. Well, his phone is at work or something. So you need to have access to the phones of the people you care about and their passwords. Otherwise, you can't use it. My friend's husband recently passed away, and she kept his phone for that very reason. So whenever she went into one of his accounts, they'd send a password only to his phone, so she could at least access that. So that's another thing your kids have to have, and there are books you can buy and things you can do, and I'll show you later about the different kinds of books you can own, which will go in your safe, but how to access everything, passwords, and because otherwise they're stuck, and what do? The other thing is get rid of anything you don't want anyone to see. Do it now. You know, it's like, It's true. I had a heart attack 6 years ago, and I'm sitting there in the hospital, and unfortunately, I'm fine, and everything. Well, I'm thinking, if my daughter-in-law goes to my nightstand drawers, what is she going to find? Or goes to my dresser, what is she going to find? Something that, which is like, Jamie did so-and-so, or what is it? If you don't want anyone to see it, get rid of it. Hide it. If you don't need it, toss it. Because just think about what do you have, like people find, not in my case, but affairs, letters their husband wrote their girlfriends or whatever. Get rid of them all. You don't need them, because, or put it in the cloud someplace where someone can't find it. But just think about it and go through your stuff. Declutter. I'm working on decluttering a house of 36 years to move into a condo, and think about what you have, what you don't want, and how to get rid of stuff. How to pay, getting your affairs in order. This is the big thing. How do you pay your bills? And do your kids know about this? We have long-term life and long-term health care. And every February I get this huge bill for thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, and I pay it every February. If I died in March, will they know to get all that money back? Will they know that I pay my car insurance 6 months in advance and they can get that back? My homeowners, will they know what to sign up for and how to get everything back? So those are really important things just to think about when you make your list of what to do. Have it, because they need to know all these things. Funerals. Again, another thing. Do you want to be cremated? Don't you want to be cremated? I'm working right now with this lovely woman who's 90 years old, who's living in independent living, and she shouldn't be. She's running out of money, and 2 kids. And one daughter lives half an hour from her, one lives 3 hours from her, and they both want her to move near them. So I sent the kids out of the room, and I sat down with the mother alone. And I said, tell me, what do you want? You're not going to tell your kids, what do you want to do? She said, I don't want to hurt anybody. I said, well, let them know, but what is your wish? You can't stay where you are. So I give people choices also when I talk to people. I said, you cannot stay in independent living because you have no socialization, you're not eating, it's not a good place. So you can either move to assisted living here, or you can move to an assisted living near one of your kids. What do you want? What's going to be the best? Forget hurting someone. Someone's going to get hurt. That's the way it's going to be. But let's talk about it now so they can get all their hurtness out of the way and then deal with you and deal with each other, because you're not going to want to die until they're settled. So make sure you talk. And we figured it out. We discussed it. And I said, and don't talk to me today. I'll meet you next week. Think about it. The other thing is, so I give my clients choices. That's not how I raised my children. I gave them choices, even though they really had none. And I tell them, we're not discussing it now. We'll discuss it later on. Think about it. We'll discuss it in a week or whatever the time is. But don't tell anybody what to do, especially older people. Give everybody choices, give the kids choices, and say, all mom wants to do is make sure you are going to be okay together. That's the biggest thing you need to know. And I said to her, do you ever want to not wake up tomorrow morning? She said, I'm 90, of course. So I asked the elephant in the room, I said, have you thought about this? She said, yeah, let me ask you a question. I said, okay. She said, what happens if I take all my Xarelto at once? I said, a really bad move, because you're going to bleed out, and you're afraid of not having money, and it's going to cost $15,000 for hazmat to come clean it up. I said, and you won't die, so forget that idea. So her kids now know she thought about it, but she's not going to do it, but a lot of people think about it, so don't be afraid to ask your parents. Do you have any thoughts about what's going to happen? What do you want? I mean, communication is the biggest thing. I'm going backwards, sorry. Will, again, when's your will been updated? Do you declutter? Where's it kept? And the other thing is, what's your healthcare proxy? The healthcare proxy is who makes the decisions if you are unable.
If you're done with it, or if you're on.
I'm sorry, what? Oh, okay.
And you see like all the different things.
So what's a healthcare proxy? So that basically means if you cannot make a decision, who's going to make it for you?
How do people know these things about me? How does the IPO know these things about me?
I'm counting on somebody fixing that. Is it coming from me or? Okay. See, they fixed it. So the healthcare proxy, basically, if you can't make the decision, if you're still capable of making a decision, you will make your own decisions. But if you can't, who's going to make it, and do they know what to do? My brother made me his healthcare proxy, and so did my sister-in-law. So his kids don't have to make that decision.
Come on.
And that's a very important thing to think about. Who's going to do it? When my mother-in-law was dying, I was it. Because my husband and her daughter could not make the decision on what to do. And I was the one who got involved and made sure that she had enough morphine, that she could breathe comfortably.
My side, I give you.
And one thing that, just an aside, that when people are dying, they still hear you, and they still get it. So, and this is where, with my mother, we really talked death a lot, so it was very easy. When she was in hospice, she was comatose, and about breathing like 40 times a minute, and not responsive. So I said to her, I went in, everybody had left the room, and I said, okay, Mom, here's the deal. We're going out to dinner now. We'll all be back, and then we'll see you. But if you want to die tonight, it's really be convenient to have a funeral on Monday, because we'll all be here. So we know you're not getting better, so just think about what
Fine.
could happen. And she was not close to death. Her
Bonus
extremities
facts
were
you do
warm.
And why you
She
might
was still
do those
making
things,
urine.
but you don't feel like you
She was
need
still
to complete if
breathing
you're
40
uncomfortable
times a
doing
minute.
it. It's
We got
just
a
like an
call,
optional
we
time.
literally
It won't
finished
affect
dinner,
the class.
we got a phone call, she went. It's just, people make decisions, people, and the other thing too at dying is, if your family member says to you, don't let me die alone, that's a very selfish thing to ask, because people do die alone, and then what you're going to do to the family, you're going to make them feel guilty forever that they weren't there. So I will always say to someone who says that, you may be alone, you may have a doula, but please don't do that to your children. If they can't be there, they're going to carry that forever and ever and ever. I was a doula, I'm a volunteer doula, and I was there with the client, and sitting there, and she was not that close, but I'm sitting there holding her hand, and the nurse comes in, gives her morphine, which she was getting every 2 hours, and the nurse opened the window, and I said, why are you doing that? She said, for the soul to leave. And you might have heard, I'd never heard that, but so I said, oh, that's so beautiful, and I looked over, and she's dead. Gone. So son came in, he said, what was it like? I told him everything except the morphine, because she obviously was ready, and I didn't want him to think that the morphine killed her. So we sometimes we embellish for the family so they get it better. It was easier for him. He said, I'm so happy she wasn't alone, that you were holding her hand, and that she had the window open. Why am I not, oh, I'm in the wrong thing. Okay, difficult conversation. I'm gonna have a slide coming up that we'll talk about, but there's a deck of cards, it's called the death deck. Have anyone seen that deck? Do you think it's like the best thing in the world? There is nothing like the death deck. It's written by a woman, by Lisa Paul. She's a social worker in hospice in California. She did it with another woman, and it is unbelievably wonderful. It just, let me see, I think it's the next slide. Oh, this is, okay, here, right here. So when and how to have the conversation. I'll ask my kids, say, let's talk, and they'll say, I'm pulling the plug. It's not necessary. And I said, no, we need to discuss these things, because we really do. Do I want a feeding tube? No. Do I want to be intubated? I guess it really depends on the situation. It's not a yes or no. Do I want to be intubated, and that's the most one, for more than a certain period of time? 1 week? But I don't like the ones that say, you can intubate me if it is determined that I don't have a quality of life or whatever. That's so vague. It needs to be more specific. What does this mean? Does it mean I'm going to always be on oxygen? Does that mean I'll never come off it? Does it mean I won't be able to go up a flight of steps, I won't be able to hug my grandchildren? What does this mean? So the death deck, and I only pulled a few things out, and the best one that I didn't pull out is my favorite, and it basically says it gives you choices, and you can play it with a group of people, we could play it here, whatever. You're stranded on a desert island. A, want your family to look for you forever and never, and assume you're alive somewhere because it's me. The other one is, let my family look for me for a year, and after that, assume I'm dead, and then go on. Third is, assume I'm dead and have a great party. So it's really interesting what people want. And what do you have to, so it makes you stop and think, what do you want? It's a hard thing, but, and some of the other questions that I have in here are, I can't even read them. Okay, but anyway, there's different questions in this thing about what happened, and there's just a wonderful, wonderful things about how you want, what do you want, cremation? Do you want to tell people? Do you want to be with people? Do you want music? Don't you want music? I was at dueling, and there was the whole family was there, like, laughing and chatting, and they had the music on loud, and they're dancing and talking old stories, and they all wanted to go out to dinner. I said, you go to dinner, I'm going to stay and be with her. And when I went and looked at her wishes, she wanted to die quietly with nothing around. So they went out, and I said, before you go out, understand she may choose to die when you're gone. And that's exactly what happened. They left. 5 minutes later, she was gone. And here, I sort of, when I did my slides, I apologize, they're a little bit out of order, but the other thing to remember is funeral wishes, plots, cremations, burial. Who's going to take care of your pets? Thought about that? You can't just assume that, your son's going to take your dog. You need to have these things arranged. Who's taking care of your pets? If you got little kids, who's going to take care of them? Bills to pay. I mean, a lot of people have bills on automatic pay. I mean, I assume when you go through the credit card, through your bank, who's going to pay them? Can your kids have access? What happens if you don't pay the mortgage for a month? Do you have a mortgage? Do they know we have your mortgage? And again, passports and passwords and things like information, which I think we went through. Now, there are organizers, which I think are wonderful. So you can go online, you can go to bookstore, a private bookstore, they probably have one of each, or you can go online to Amazon, and they're all pretty much the same, but they're all individualized. And it's like my final wishes organizer, when I'm gone, peace of mind planner, and they're basically notebooks, and you could put all the forms that you need there. You could put all your passwords in there. You could put journal, how to communicate my last wishes. And in one book's called Important Shit I Need You to Know When I Die. I also think it's really good if you know you're gonna die, even if you don't, write letters. Like, write things like to your grandchildren. On your high school graduation, I really wish I was there, but I know you're gonna do so-and-so. Send them, put birthday cards in here so you could have birthday cards. I give my kids $18 for every occasion. But what it is, they get $18, which is the Jewish equivalent of chai, which is life. So I'm gonna put envelopes together, and they're all gonna have their $18 in it. I don't know for how many years, and they'll probably complain because inflation will be worth nothing. But the point is, write letters. You put things down that you want them to know. Write stories, like when your father did so-and-so, so they can remember them. They can remember you. They can remember, I remember when I took you to the zoo the first time, and you wanted to go pee like the bears or something. I got a grandson. So things like that, funny things that they can look and see, and they will remember you the way you want to be remembered. And there's other things called the 5 wishes, and they do this a lot in hospice. And I think the 5 wishes are really important when you know you're going to die, because they're more specified for dying, but they also are good for just to discuss. When I sit down, I sit with people, I do the 5 wishes, I discuss advance directives, healthcare proxy, and the MOLST form, or POLST. And I put these in there just to discuss what they want, because you don't think you're going to die tomorrow, but if God forbid you do, just think about these things, and that you want your family to know, your kids to know. So what's an advance directive? Living will, and their directives to the medical team to, if you can't do it yourself. And there are all different ones, and the hospitals will go, and you go to a hospital and say, do you have an advance directive? Yes, check. And they don't ask you for a copy of it. They never ask you for your advance directive. You say, yeah, because all they have to do is check a box. The other thing that people don't know is what a MOLST and the POLST form are for. And they're really only important in two instances. Instance one, if an EMT comes to your house, you could have DNR plastered, tattooed across your entire chest. You could be wearing a bracelet. If you don't have one of those forms, EMT will do every single thing in their power to keep you alive. That is their job. You know, when my father-in-law was dying, we said, do not call 911 until he's cold. Because you don't want to have to see that. It's a really bad thing to watch them work on your family loved one. So that is, it's there. Or when I worked at the hospital, we'd be sending people to hospice, put them in the ambulance to go literally up the hill. If their heart stopped in that ambulance, they would start it again. They had to have that form. So it's an important form, and it needs to be kept in a place where EMT or someone can see it. The client I had recently, I said, do you have a form? She goes, oh yeah. It was tucked away in her wallet, folded in like 10 folded 10 times. Nobody would have looked. And it was from 2016. It didn't work. No one would use it. So it needs to be there. The other thing I recommend is that you get a bracelet that says POLST form and where it is. So if an EMT will look at your bracelet and make sure that you have it, and they'll be able to use it. I'm going backwards. Okay, the death doula. Death doula came about because of birth doulas, and there's different kinds of death doulas. There's private death doulas who charge, and they come in and they do all this organization for life, and then after you die, they help the family put everything in motion and help you get through all the things. And there's volunteer doulas, and I'm a volunteer doula through my hospice. They'll call me up and they'll say, we have a patient on impending death, the daughter wants to go to dinner, will you go sit with a family member? And if I can, I will go do that. I went in recently, and the woman is comatose. She sort of like has the O sign. For anyone in medicine, we all know the O sign, like when you're not getting oxygen, you just sit there like this. She had the O sign, and attached to her arm, she had a feeding tube, giving her food, and she had IV fluids. And she's breathing horribly. So I waited a while to see what was gonna happen, still breathing regularly, and I bring in the nurse, and the nurse starts to cry, and she said her daughter doesn't get it. We tried, and we tried, and we tried. We told her she doesn't need to be fed. And she insists that she gets fed. So they're feeding her tube feedings, they're giving her IV fluids, which is keeping her alive, and why? She's dying, what do we do? But the daughter in her own mind hadn't accepted the fact that her mother was dying. And that's where I think you're going to die, we're all going to die. You wanna have a good death, you wanna die better, and my line is, have a good death. You know, that's what I want for everybody. Die a good death. Why should it be miserable? Why should you be uncomfortable? We don't need to be. We can make it better. And morphine is not killing you. That's the other thing to remember. All morphine does is ease respirations. If you're meant to die, you're gonna die, and it makes it easier. It's not, people getting under depression. I don't want to give my mother morphine, it's going to kill her. It's not going to kill her, it'll make it easier. Maybe by a minute or two, it won't kill her. So the death doula is just different kinds of doulas. And I didn't go, I was trained at my hospice, and because I did a lot of dying talks with my patients, when I worked as a PA, I was very comfortable being a doula. And it's so natural. It's so really beautiful and touching to be sitting with someone as they take their last breath. You know, you think it's horrible, but it's not. It is, there's no feeling like it. You're sitting there and they're just breathing, and then it just stopped. And, I remember I'm gonna go digress. On one of the cards from the death deck, it said, what are the things you shouldn't say to somebody family member when they die? Your mother's in a better place. She's out of her suffering. It's a good thing she died now, before she ran out of money. Things like that. Oh, people say that all, you can't believe what people say. So what do you do with people when they die? What should you say, and what should you do with friends when they die? And my recommendation is, just don't ask them any questions, be silent. And don't say, I know how you feel. That is the worst. I know what you're going through. And don't talk about yourself. Hold their hand and say, I'm here. That's it. You text them every couple days, thinking of you. That's all you do. And then you may say, I'm going to bring you dinner. Do you want Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday? Would you like X, Y, and Z? They can't make decisions. You know, you've just lost your husband. How could you decide? Do you want dinner Thursday? Do you want pizza? Do you want lasagna? Do you want this? I'm coming on these days, so you give them a choice, but an easy choice, and give them, and then they'll respond. And don't forget, and just keep, stay in their mind. And if they don't respond to you, that's okay. At some point you may say, because I've done this, do you want me to stop texting? And I've done it like 4 times. Everyone says, no. I'll reach out when I need you, but just stay in touch with the people who are dying. Emotional baggage. Yep, we talked about this one. The forms, and the difference between the advance directives and the POLST. And the advance directives are a legal document, and they identify your legal, proxy, and the EMT will not follow it. And the POLST, they do follow it. And there's 3 parts to your advance directives. Can't make decisions. How do you want to live? Do you want to be a terminal state? Do you want to be we have a friend who he had a heart attack, and the kids, they did CPR. And if you're not going to be able to perfuse to that brain, don't do it. Don't do it. My husband's a big chested guy, and I've already said to him, if you die, I'm not doing CPR. It sounds horrible, but I'm not. Because I will never, ever be able to push hard enough on his chest to get blood flow to his brain. So it's an important thing to know. And what's end stage? Do you want dialysis or not? And we talked about what to do with the POLST form. Okay, difference between palliative and hospice. Everybody thinks hospice is a bad word. It's like, I can't go to hospice. Hospice, if you don't know, is the best gift you could ever give anybody, because you can be in hospice. The limit, you have to write a letter saying, I say that so-and-so has 6 months to live. Nothing happens if you live a year and a half. Look at Jimmy Carter. He's been in hospice, going on 2 years? And it's comfort care. It means he's not going to be treated, he's not getting better. He's not going to get better. It's giving him comfort care. Palliative care is not life-ending per se. It's giving you comfort care. It treats you. And you can be treated sometimes in hospice. You can get radiation in hospice if it's going to help your pain. You can get blood in hospice if it's going to help your breathing. You're not going to get blood to bring your crits up, but you'll get it if it's make you more comfortable. So hospice has totally changed, and I call it the gift of hospice. Okay. Questions, talks, comments? Anyone add anything? I'm sure there's a lot of things we can talk about. And remember, your stories will help somebody else when they have to deal with somebody, with their own family member or a loved one.
So I have Is it on? Nope, that's not on. Hello? Oh. Well, so I kind of have a question. So I have a family member who is
Can you speak up a little bit?
in remission, but terminal to the point we are now in the 4-month mark that she has left. She is currently in the process of trying to get things together because her children don't understand what they need to do. Her biggest worry is the bills that she's paying, even though they're set up to be paid with her medical bills. When she passes, what happens to those? She doesn't want those to go to her children. She refused to get married because she didn't want them to go to her spouse, and so they've been together for many years and didn't get married because of medical expenses.
Ask a lawyer. I think that no one's going to be responsible. That's my understanding. I could be wrong, but I have a friend who was in the same thing. She lived with her partner for many, many years. They didn't get married. and he had bills up the wazoo, and she was not responsible, and his kids were not responsible. So my check, I would just call an elder care lawyer
Okay.
and get that taken care of.
And the other thing, because of her financial fear that she's currently in, she refused hospice.
Hospice is free. Hospice is
Right.
100%
How do
free.
you, but how do you, I guess my question is, how do you encourage someone to utilize such a service that I've seen even in my area that has done wonders for people?
Ask her if she will just let them come talk to her.
Okay.
But it's all free. They pay your medications. Are they gonna give you your statin anymore if you're terminal? Probably not.
Yeah,
But
she's
you don't
not
need it.
taking any
Okay,
medications
what I'm saying is, they will pay for medications. They will come out and visit. They're not a 24-hour service. They're there, like, they come twice a week.
Okay.
But say, will you just listen to somebody from hospice talk to you? And they don't pay anything. It's all
Okay.
covered.
Awesome, thank you.
Sorry, can I offer a suggestion? If it's a hospice that also has palliative, a lot of times, so I'm the senior clinical quality director for hospice and palliative. And the amount of times we get patients that are true hospice patients, that they get into the gateway through palliative, it happens all the time. So if she's not open to hospice, she might be open to palliative, and when she does come around and realize she needs hospice, it's a very easy transition into hospice from palliative.
And the palliative has insurance, you need money for palliative. That goes through your insurance, and hospice is free. So that's something, if she's worried about her bills. But the minute if she calls 911 or goes to the hospital, she has to come off hospice. But you can come off and go back on.
I was going to just tag on to that. You can absolutely have hospice come speak to them, and sometimes you don't even talk about hospice, just end-of-life care, and reminder that it's not the end-all be-all, right? They can come off a hospice at any point in time. Thank you for your presentation. I'm a huge proponent of talking about death. It can be beautiful. I
should
just
be
wanted to share
beautiful.
2 resources. Ira Byock, if you haven't read Ira Byock, he's written several books, but Dying Well
Can you
is
spell it?
IRA Byock. I should say Dr. Ira Byock. Has written several books about death and dying well. And another author that I am a huge fan of is Dr. Jessica Zitter.
Oh,
Zitter.
She's wonderful.
Amazing. I'm a huge fan. I'm the president of her fan club. No, I'm kidding. But she
I'm
wrote a
vice
book,
president.
Extreme Measures. And it talks about, she also did a documentary and won an Oscar. And she is just an amazing advocate for having these conversations. I've been doing this for 25 years, and I can't say enough how important it is to have that difficult conversation. And as an advocate, for you to bring it up rather than the family, because sometimes there's a little stuff that gets mixed up in there. So thank you for your presentation. I appreciate it.
I wanted to be convenient.
Zitter? It's just, she's unbelievable. The documentary, if you haven't seen it, is just phenomenal.
I just wanted to say too, I also am of the same thought that that is the most honorable journey we could ever be on, is assisting somebody at the end of their life. Because the moment we're born, we start dying. So, there's nothing more honorable. So thank you for doing all that. The other thing is another resource is gone from my site. I missed the first few minutes, so I don't know if you talked about it. It's by Barbara Carnes, I think, and she's a nurse. It's a pamphlet. They're cheap. You can order them on Amazon, and I send them out to patients. It just talks very, very simply about what the last days and weeks of going towards death looks like, the body shutting down, and it's a very helpful resource for families.
Thank you. 2 other things that I think that if anybody here, and I'm assuming you're at this talk, so you probably are able to, can do this, I feel you're committed. I think you have to do it. Because it's like a mission. It's by passion. And someone says, how can you do this? I said, because I can. And if you can, I think you have to. because there are not many people who can do this, and it's so important. And the other thing is eating and feeding. We, especially, I'm sure we're not the only culture, but Jewish people love to feed. And we think you're getting sick. I have people come in and say, but he won't eat lunch, but I don't want to eat lunch. Dying without eating or drinking, it takes a few weeks, but it's a very peaceful way to go. It is the most peaceful. The first time I saw it, I was kind of shocked. It bothered me, but it is the most peaceful way to die. You're not hungry, you're not thirsty after a couple of days, and you just slowly die. And don't feed someone. They don't want to eat, don't feed them. To make you feel better. It won't make them feel better.
When you were mentioning the forms and making sure they're available, we literally put it on the front door. We put it on the bedroom door. We put it everywhere. Because in Texas, you know, we like to save our people, but it's not appropriate if they're outside of the hospital and they don't wish it. So we just literally put it on the front door. Has anybody else had experiences like that? There you go, refrigerator.
The freezer. EMTs are also taught to look in the freezer. So you can stick it in an envelope in the freezer.
I even created a magnet that's on the front of my refrigerator that says, I mean, I was cheeky about it. I'm like, if I'm dead, look here. For like all of my information. And my fiance knows that all of my planning and all of that is in the freezer, because like, where's the one place
If there's a fire, it's a good place to be.
Yeah, I made a joke about it. I was like, well, I'm cold, so go to the cold place.
And also when you go into a hospital, they will give you bracelets. Some hospitals will put a bracelet on you for your DNR. Be sure you have the bracelet if it's your family member, because I've seen instances where they forget to look for the bracelet or they forget to put the bracelet on, and they bring them back, and the family and the person do not want to be put back. So it's very important to be sure that you know.
One thing we run into quite often in New York State is people think because they have a living will or they filled out a healthcare proxy and they have it somewhere at home, that when they go to the ER and can't speak for themselves, their wishes will somehow be known. And even if you have a living will in your purse, which I just had this happen 2 weeks ago with a client, the hospital can't accept that because it's not a medical order. So as you were saying, have that MOLST or POLST in some states.
Yeah.
Make sure it's on record. Make sure everything you have is on record with your hospital. Make sure that healthcare proxy is signed. They don't have to be witnessed in New York. I don't know about other states. But if it's not in the hospital system's computer system, they won't know when you arrive that you have someone chosen, that you have wishes. So just having it's not enough. It has to be where they can find it.
There was also a man, I think he's in Chicago, and I can't remember his name, and I wish I could. He's a physician. He developed an app for advanced directives. And you have the advanced directives, and you could fill it out. And I think I could buy it, and then I could sell it to people. And you get a QR code. So you get that QR code, you keep that in your wallet. So it's like next to your insurance, so the hospital can then pull up that QR code, and we'll have every single thing on it. I think it's brilliant. I need to look into it more, because I think it's something we should all be able to get. Because if you think the hospital pulls up your insurance, they have a QR code that has every single thing there. Because hospitals don't always have everything.
We have just a few more minutes.
I just have a question, something that I was exposed to more recently, and I've been a nurse for 14 years. A lot of people talk about medical power of attorneys, but in the state of Arizona, that doesn't cover mental health. And so, again, just be mindful of that per your state laws, that there is also a mental health power of attorney. And I think as we're serving clients, you know, they come to the hospital and they're like, advanced directive, medical power of attorney, and as nurses, that was part of our job to help collect those records, but never was mental health mentioned. And so just, again, just be mindful. Yeah. And again, it's probably state-based, but it's just an interesting fact.
My daughter was a mental health attorney in New York. I'm going to ask her, and they're way ahead of everybody else, so that's a very good point. Huh? Well, west in Arizona. Yeah, I'll find out. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is a great program. I am an attorney in Kentucky, and I'm here as the general counsel for KTS Advocacy. But I kind of agree that attorneys can get in the way sometimes of this thing. And especially with the state licensing things, I would just say, I mean, I can do healthcare directives and medical power of attorneys, but it's confusing. And most attorneys really are confused as you cross state lines. And then there's the elder law people who are all into this stuff. So I guess my story is I need to talk to my parents about this. And I think like 5 years ago, they wanted to talk to us kids about it. And like we just kind of said, oh, we'll talk later. And now, 5 years later, it's like they were trying to tell us something. So, when I get back, we'll talk. But great program. And
Thank you.
the other thing I would say, the medical records, the digital records versus the paper records, us attorneys get real confused about witnesses and notaries and all that stuff. So just keep, know your state, I guess is what I'd say.
I once asked an attorney, I said, do you think you do a good job at discussing advanced directives and forms? He said, I do a lousy job. I charge by the hour. They don't want to do it. He said, get somebody else to do it. They can review it. They should do it all, because attorneys, unless they're in elder care, don't do it well, because of what they charge an hour, and clients say, oh, I don't want to spend 3 hours discussing this. So this is where we can come in and sit down and have a package where you discuss the forms and charge them X amount of dollars and give it all, and they can take it back to the lawyer and get it done. But lawyers don't have the time, and people don't want to spend the money with the lawyer oftentimes.
If you're in Texas, I do have a lawyer that'll do it over Zoom and do it via mail courier, just FYI. I have a client, this is the first time I've ever heard of this. Is anybody familiar with Care For? It's a guardianship program. Are you familiar with it? So it's the most bananas thing I've ever heard of. It's the guardianship program for this gentleman who is an attorney. They are restricting every access for him to get care. He's been in an apartment in New York with his sister. She was totally taking advantage. They've gotten him transferred to Texas, therefore I'm on the case. But they're limiting, Care For is limiting his visitations, his therapies. He's put up in a house. He has 24-hour medical assistant care, but he's not going to get access to his family anymore. He's not going to get access to therapies. He hasn't had therapy in 7 months. I went over the other day to onboarded him to my services, and he hadn't been showered in a week, and we ended up doing that and getting him dressed. But I just wondered if anybody had ever heard of it. It's the most bananas things I've ever heard of, and the things that they're mandating don't make any sense to me. So I just wondered if, well, a lot of things don't make sense to me. So here's the thing. Adult Protective Services, his needs are being met. Like, he's being fed, he's being cleaned, his skin integrity is good, he has, a comfy bed he's in, that kind of thing. So the immediate need of the Murphy's Law access, to those things is all being met. It's the bigger picture. I totally think so, but I don't think Adult Protective Services would go beyond, because those basic needs are met. Well, and we're hoping, so that's the other thing too. They have said that they are willing to step down as guardians, but they're balking about who the choices are that are being presented. And now the person that they're wanting is the child of the person who doesn't even turn 18 till next week. Anyway. Care For. F-O-R. C-A-R-E-F-O-R. Sorry.
Real quick, we're running out of time. Super big request. I'm here to meet people like you. I do Medicare planning. I don't sell insurance. Don't think I sell insurance. But we do planning, and as a part of the Medicare planning that we do at age 65, 64, my clients need help from people like you to help with stuff like this. Please connect. If you see me, please connect. Hi, Becky. Please connect with me. Say hi. Let me know you exist, because my clients are all across the country. I need them to connect with people like you. Financial advisors, attorneys don't do this. Myra, thank you again for this amazing talk.